The magician's strength is to slay devils. You are not your mind, so what do you have to lose? Welcome, tarot lovers and spiritual explorers, to another episode of Builders of the Light Web. And if I could get this to work, there we go. I'm your guide, Damien Sebuhian. Today, in this second episode of our series called The Way of the Cosmic Magician, Navigating the Seven Stages of Spiritual Unfoldment, I will reveal in detail how, by understanding the relationship between the three major arcana tarot keys pictured here, the aspirant may free herself from mental bondage and begin the exciting adventure of slaying the devils of the mind. These ideas come from a specific matrix of the tarot of the Major Arcana, first developed by legendary spiritual alchemist Paul Foster Case, founder of the mystery school Builders of the Adytum, or BOTA. And there's a picture of the BOTA. The Bodo Tarot is slightly different from the more popular Rider-Waite deck. Dr. Foster Case was a contemporary of Arthur Edward Waite and Pamela Coleman Smith, pictured there, the developers of the Rider-Waite deck that burst onto the metaphysical scene over 100 years ago in 1909. However, Case, working with artist Jesse Burns Park, changed what he claimed were mistakes or blinds on the part of Waite. Thus was created the Boda Tarot deck. Another interesting fact about the Boda deck, the pictorial keys were originally printed in black and white and with instructions for Case's students on how to color them in. Case believed that it was important for his students to understand the symbolism more comprehensively by starting off with the simple yet time-consuming act of coloring them in. The deck that I've been showcasing for these videos and articles was painted by Jory Brown, whose work is showcased on Pinterest. And those paintings here on this tableau that there's pictured of me holding, that's all me printouts of Jory Brown's work. I've been studying tarot for 25 years now, and the most essential aspect of my tarot study has only a little to do with tarot readings, which I do regularly, but readings only brush the surface of what the tarot is all about. Tarot at its highest is about enlightenment. The idea of enlightenment is as old as human suffering. There would be no concept of enlightenment without suffering or ignorance, just as there would be no concept of pleasure without its opposite. So no suffering, no Buddha, no Jesus, no spiritual teachers at all, because we wouldn't need them. So for as long as humans have experienced suffering, there have arisen great teachers who claim to know how to free us from that suffering. And if we follow their ways, we can even reach enlightenment or oneness with our true natures, which is a state of eternal bliss beyond duality where we perpetually resonate with the Spirit of God. Paul Foster Case was very aware of many of these spiritual teachers, and he found within the Major Arcana a roadmap that, if comprehended and followed correctly, could lead anyone from suffering to enlightenment. Think of all the myriad of books, the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, the Upanishads, the I always have a hard time saying that word, Tripitaka. It's the Buddhist texts. These are huge tomes that take lifetimes to read and comprehend. The tarot is very much like any of these books, only instead of using words, the secrets of how to free yourself from suffering and towards unfolding into your true self can be explored and revealed through a set of 22 symbolic pictorial keys, or if you're using the whole deck, it's 78. From what I've gathered in my 25 years of study, I could easily write a 500-page book on the Fool key alone. Indeed, French occultist Eliphas Levi said of the tarot, as an erudite Kabbalistic book, all combinations of which reveal the harmonies pre-existing between signs, letters, and numbers, the practical value of the tarot is truly and above all marvelous. A prisoner devoid of books, had he only a tarot of which he knew how to make use, could in a few years acquire a universal science and converse with an unequaled doctrine and inexhaustible eloquence. Okay, so let's begin with a brief overview of the number 7. After all, we're discussing the 7 stages of spiritual unfoldment. But why 7 exactly? Good question. As we all know, 7 is a highly charged number with a myriad of references. We've all heard of the 7 deadly sins. And remember that one special movie about that called 7? Then there are the 7 days of the week, which corresponds with Genesis's creation of the world in 7 days. These are the 7 Hermetic principles, which are mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. Then there is the 7 bodily energy bodies known as the chakras. And those correspond color-wise with the 7 colors of the rainbow. And in astrology, we have Saturn, the planet of karma, and it has 4 7-year cycles per solar return. Finally, there's a poem by the world's greatest known bard, William Shakespeare, whose writings, viewed from the lens of the occult and the esoteric nature of humanity, are quite illuminating. The poem is embedded in one of his lesser plays called As You Like It, and is most commonly titled The 7 Stages of Man. It begins, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. Shakespeare identified these 7 ages as infant, schoolboy, lover, soldier, justice, pantaloon, and the 7th stage he called second childishness and mere oblivion. So, metaphorically speaking, Shakespeare's poem describes the cyclical nature of the evolution of consciousness, where we begin our spiritual journey as an infant, and we go through the stages that eventually lead us back to infancy. Here's another image of that idea, this one taking it further into the realm of reincarnation. Symbolically speaking, this is no mere infancy of the brain due to literal old age. This is the infancy of the mind, where the individual becomes as one with God by returning to what Paul Foster Case called the limitless light, what Shakespeare calls oblivion. The people or actors are playing out their roles. This could be another way of saying working out their karma. We return again and again to the stage until our roles are finished and we no longer have to return to the stage of the world of birth, suffering, aging, sickness, death, and rebirth. According to many in the spiritual community, humanity, and indeed the entire planet, is in an ascension process that's somehow related to the age of Aquarius. Is this true? What is this ascension process? Is it this or this? What are we ascending to, and what are we ascending from? These are challenging questions, in no part because they seem so abstract. It's difficult to imagine or conceive what ascension would look like. I mean, will you still be able to stream your favorite shows? I'm on the last season of Outlander, after all. And if we all ascend before I finish the season, will that unsatisfied feeling of incompleteness carry over into the new age? Will I be able to take a selfie as I'm ascending and pass it on to Instagram? Will my social media accounts ascend with me? So many questions. Joking aside, it's my humble opinion that the word ascension is a misnomer in the context of the so-called ascension process, and the reality of our situation is a lot closer to this quote by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The purpose of life is not to transcend the body, but to embody the transcendent. What a beautiful concept. And it's a perfect description of the purpose behind the 7 stages as developed by Paul Foster Case. So, let's get to it, shall we? As I said at the top, the first stage of spiritual unfoldment is called bondage. And no, it's not the kind of bondage you might be thinking of. It's the bondage to the 5 sense world. It's the bondage to the mind. And the primary lesson of stage 1 is about how to free yourself from that bondage, from the prison of the mind. As Americans, it can be argued that each of us is born into a form of bondage, bondage to our parents, to the government, to corporations. When we reach the 5-year-old stage, we must enroll in a state or private school where we are treated as empty vessels that need to be filled with state-approved knowledge. We are expected to memorize and regurgitate this knowledge through a perpetual battery of tests. We advance as we age from grade to grade until we finally reach the pinnacle of graduation. Then we're expected to either start working as a low wage laborer for $40 or 40 plus hours a week, or else attend exorbitantly priced colleges to pursue a field of study that will allegedly set us on the track toward a career. In the meantime, as we progress up the education to employment ladder, we're bombarded with cultural pressures, most of which are related to a materialistic consumer product dynamic of identification labels, so that when you meet someone new at a bar, you'll have the very basics of social rhetoric downloaded into your overtaxed yet somehow underused mind. You can say, "Hey, what's your name and what do you do?" And everywhere around the world, we've all been trained at this point to give a quick, predictable answer. Something like, "I'm Joe Landry and I'm an online influencer." "Awesome, I'm Sally Williamson and I figured out how to use my gender studies degree to become a life coach. I've waited my whole entire 23 years of life for this moment." And you don't want to lose that opportunity. I hear you. That's why it's so important to realize that people need our guidance and influence. Totally. Speaking of influencers, children are trained by ads at a very young age to demand the latest phones, tablets, or video game consoles to keep up with the latest trends in sneakers, clothing, makeup, music, so on and so forth. Amongst this whirlwind cycle involved in identifying themselves with the stuff they own and the stuff they really, really want to own, there isn't a lot of space made for learning how to own their own minds. Another form of bondage is demonstrated by mental health issues. In the US, according to most data out there, 1 in 4 adults suffer from some form of mental illness. A poetic metaphor for what is meant by bondage comes from a quote from William Blake, 1757 to 1827. In my introductory video to the 7 stages, I quoted Blake's most famous line: "If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite." The line immediately following that one is very informative regarding where most of humanity stands today. It goes as follows: "For man has closed himself up till he sees all things through narrow chinks of his cavern." This condition of bondage is demonstrated in most of our social systems, from politics to education to medicine. Consider this quote from Michael Elner: "Just look at us. Everything is backward. Everything is upside down. Doctors destroy health. Lawyers destroy justice. Psychiatrists destroy minds. Scientists destroy truth. Major media destroys information. Religions destroy spirituality. And governments destroy freedom." While there's a lot of generalization and hyperbole in that quote, it's hard to argue that the majority of the social systems in our world are corrupt and seem to support only a relatively small group of the ruling elite, while leaving the rest of the populace fighting amongst themselves. The ownership classes have relied upon the old divide and rule tactic for millennia to keep this bondage system in place. While there are many examples of how bondage takes place in our world, the way to freedom isn't by directly fighting this system through external means. We free ourselves by freeing our minds. This brings us to the overview goal of stage 1. By focusing awareness and intention on the life force energy of the spinal column and its expression in the heart center through such practices as Kriya Yoga, etc., the practitioner strengthens the mind-body-spirit connection, revealing many truths, which include that consciousness is fundamental and everything springs from it, including the 5-sense 3-dimensional world. Everything is an expression of the one consciousness. The environment outside world cannot provide lasting fulfillment. Fulfillment, and happiness comes from integrating the mind with the higher self. When a person is in a state of bondage, he is ruled by his thoughts and feelings about what his senses tell him the world is like. He is drawn to what feels good and repelled by what feels bad. He identifies himself by his thoughts, feelings, and culturally established labels, ignorant that he is part of the one consciousness, and what he tunes into, he manifests. Such a person, and believe me, I've been there myself, becomes a slave to his lower desires. But it's through the ultimately superficial nature of these desires, the fact that they are never completely fulfilling, that the person in bondage can begin to free himself. Like an alcoholic hitting the proverbial bottom through his own desperate grasping, he may eventually realize that the only way towards the peace he's been craving is through looking inward. So that's the overview of stage 1 of spiritual unfoldment. Let's take a look at the 3 keys individually. First up, key 1, the magician. The magician in the first stage of spiritual unfoldment represents not only the primary mode of consciousness, but the entirety of the mind field and all its properties. All 7 of the Hermetic principles apply to this key. The 4 functions of mind in Hinduism, ahamkara, chitta, buddhi, and manas, correspond to the 4 elements, fire, water, air, earth, which are symbolized by the 4 objects on the magician's table: wand, cup, sword, and pentacle. The figure of the magician represents will, or directed concentration, working with the elements, mind functions, and the ultimate laws of what you plant, so shall you reap. That which is above is as that which is below. The magician is the chooser, the one who directs his thoughts and ideas into the garden of the subconscious mind. According to Paul Foster Case, the symbols of the magician refer to powers of the self-conscious phase of personal mental activity. These powers are directed primarily to the control of forces and things below the self-conscious level, or the subconscious. The energy utilized comes from above, from superconsciousness, or Brahman, Atman, or Purusha. It is fixed and modified by acts of attention. Concentration is the great secret of the magical art. True concentration is perfect transparency, in which personality becomes a free, unobstructed channel for the passage downward and outward of the subconscious radiant energy. All magic is in the will. We are all magicians in that we choose our realities based on our thoughts, feelings, and most importantly, our intentions. However, most people are unconscious magicians because they think life just happens, and they are either lucky or unlucky, and their thoughts and feelings are completely separate from the life that they lead. This is the fundamental lie of the material world, or Maya, that binds us to the whims of the outside world. A conscious, aware magician is a person who knows that they attract to themselves what they are resonant with. Therefore, the goal is to consciously, rather than unconsciously, direct the mind, to be conscious of the thoughts and feelings, and to not identify with them, but to use them for choosing realities by making clear, powerful intentions. An example scenario would be a woman who says she wants to quit smoking. As an unconscious magician, she will subvert her efforts by paying attention to and obeying the voices of her lower ego that tell her she needs a cigarette because of this or that reason. It's so hard, she'll say. I'm so addicted. These are basically spells she is casting on herself, and they will manifest in her life as she continues to smoke. If she confronts the issue of quitting smoking from a conscious magician perspective, she'll understand the power of words and intentions. She might say before going to bed, and as soon as she gets up in the morning, the phrase, "It's so wonderful to be free from this addiction." She'll imagine having fresh breath, looking at her tongue in the mirror and seeing it pink and rosy instead of grimy and gray. She'll imagine her friends saying stuff like, "Congratulations on quitting smoking." In short, she'll put her mind to work with her intentions and the words and feelings she uses. Every time a craving arises like a wave, she'll counter that wave by going for a jog around the block or performing a quick mindfulness routine. She'll engaging in these practices, she is freeing herself from her bondage and she is reclaiming her power. When we're being the unconscious magician, we're led by the elements of our mind, our sensory world, pentacles, our emotional world, cups, our mental world, swords, and our ego or sense of self, wands, are running the show. On the other hand, a conscious magician is someone who is aware of the elements of the mind and uses them as tools to resonate with who they want to be and what they want to experience. Now, let's take a look at key 8, called strength. The strength key is placed below the magician key in the row that corresponds to the intermediary activities, laws, or agencies that the key represents in the first row act through. So there you see it, the magician, strength card, and the devil key in that first column. Thus, the magician, which can be summarized here as signifying focused intention, acts through the law signified by the strength key. It's through this relationship that we are more capable of lifting the veil of lies and illusions that tell us that our thoughts, emotions, ego, and body is who we essentially are. If we focus our intentions upon the strength key, we realize that we are not the activities of our mind, rather we are the eternal witness, as symbolized by the woman in white, married to the force that guides and directs the activities of the mind. So let's take a more in-depth look. According to Case, the Hebrew letter corresponding to the strength key is Teth, which means snake. And the symbol of that, what has been known among occultists for ages as the serpent power. This serpent power is symbolized by the red lion. It is cosmic electricity, the universal life principle, the conscious energy which takes form as all things and builds everything from within. The control of this energy by mental means is the primary goal of this stage. The symbol for Leo resembles a serpent, and the sign governing the spine is thus related to the nerve currents directed upward through the spinal centers in the practice of yoga. The idea of yoga is the purpose of the strength key within the context of the first stage of spiritual unfoldment. By yoga, I don't necessarily mean the stretching exercises of downward dog and sun salutation and all the rest, although those are incredibly valuable exercises to engage in. By yoga in this context, I mean anything that helps you connect with your higher self, your intuition, your Atman or Buddha nature, your Christ consciousness. To make sure our intentions are in alignment with our higher selves, we concentrate our attention, magician, through some form of practice like yoga, qigong, breath work, prayer, meditation, and even physical exercise meant to strengthen the spine and heart centers. In short, we want to drop the mind into the heart so we can strengthen our intuition and life force energies, all of which will help us in realizing that we are in control of our minds and not the other way around. The result of maintaining a spiritual practice that purifies and strengthens this spinal column and kundalini and prana potencies, as well as the heart center, is an ego that is in balance with the higher self, as symbolized by the woman in white. The woman in white is actually the feminine principle of the magician. She is the intuitive nature, the heart of compassion, that part of us that empathizes rather than judges, accepts rather than condemns. She guides the ego rather than suppresses it. Part of the ego's job is to desire that what it perceives as favorable and avoids what it perceives as unfavorable. Although mindfulness practice of our choosing, through a mindfulness practice of our choosing, we enhance our ability to guide our ego to desire that which is psychologically, physically, and spiritually fulfilling, rather than constantly pursuing a hamster wheel of superficial and temporary pleasures that don't actually serve us. An example of a relationship between key 1 and key 8 would be something like this. I'm on Twitter and I read something that triggers an anger response in my gut. My heart starts to race. I need to respond, my ego says. But because I've been practicing mindfulness and yoga, etc., I know better than to lash out. Now I know, because of what I've learned, that the act of being offended is itself an indication of where I need to do some work. Peter Crone, the self-described mind architect, has an excellent quote. Life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free. When I get offended by something I read on social media, I'm being shown where I'm not free. Even if the person who made the offensive tweet was fully intending to offend people, if I respond in kind, I've already lost because I'm now engaging my lower ego and stressing out my psyche. I've had entire weekends ruined because I couldn't get over a meaningless debate I had with someone on Facebook. Now, however, when I get triggered, I check in with myself. I ask myself, what was it that triggered me? How can I release these negative feelings without engaging with this individual? I almost always find the reasons and I release the anger or the fear or whatever it was by saying something like, I am not my thoughts and emotions. I am the observer of my thoughts and emotions. I am not the dark clouds passing over the blue sky. I am the blue sky. One of my favorite quotes, oops, let me go back there. Sorry about that. One of my favorite intentions goes like this. I relax and release all mental, emotional, and physical burdens, allowing God to express through me perfect love, peace, and happiness or wisdom. Usually that does the trick. All right, next slide. In the book, The Four Agreements, the one that most relates to this stage is the agreement to take nothing personally. If you're going to go on Twitter and other places where toxic discourse is pervasive, remember these wise words from Don Miguel Ruiz. Whatever happens around you, don't take it personally. Nothing other people do is because of you. It is because of themselves. All people live in their own dream, in their own mind. They are in a completely different world from the one we live in. When we take something personally, we make the assumption that they know what is in our world, and we try to impose our world on their world. Even when a situation seems so personal, even if others insult you directly, it has nothing to do with you. What they say, what they do, and the opinions they give are according to the agreements they have in their own minds. Taking things personally makes you easy prey for these predators, the black magicians. They can hook you easily with one little opinion and feed you whatever poison they want. And because you take it personally, you eat it up. All right, so here we're going to look at some unhealthy relationships. What happens if you have an unhealthy relationship between key 1 and key 8? It results in what we see here. Individuals whose egos are almost always running the show. They are constantly attempting to control the world outside of themselves, in part because they mistakenly believe that through this control of their environment, they can make themselves safe and happy. I would argue that much of what is considered woke culture has been exploited and corrupted by ideological forces to use it as yet another divide and conquer tactic. It's being used now to control what people do and say in order to, quote, make a better world. While the intention of creating a better world is commendable, the means to do so in a positive way that actually creates a better world has been described by countless sages throughout history, such as Gandhi, who said, "We but mirror the world. All the tendencies present in the outer world are to be found in the world of our body. If we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As a man changes his own nature, so does the attitude of the world change toward him. This is the divine mystery supreme. A wonderful thing it is, and the source of our happiness. We need not wait to see what others do." To get the most out of key 8, I recommend reading Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and begin practicing the more practical parts of the Eightfold Path, which is quite similar to Buddhism's Eightfold Path. You can be a Christian, a Muslim, or even an atheist. It doesn't matter. You can still follow the Eightfold Path because it's not a belief structure. It's a mindfulness practice that helps you differentiate between your ego and your higher self and helps you live closer to your heart. Okay, so here we have the last of the 3 keys. Drum roll, please. It's the devil. Yep, the devil. So the devil in the first stage of spiritual unfoldment is the resulting condition or phenomenon of what happens when you focus your intentions through expanding your heart. Is that what I'm saying? No, not quite. When you successfully lower your mind into your heart, it becomes easier for you to express and or to expose the devil within and without. So what is the devil? Well, the devil is Maya, or illusion. Everything that is not the pure infinite consciousness is considered Maya, which is pretty much every form in existence as it is perceived. Maya isn't good or bad in and of itself. It depends on how you relate to it. Do you identify yourself with Maya, or can you recognize the illusory, ever-changing nature of Maya, both out in the world and within your own mind? You can better alert yourself to the moments where you identify with your ego, your emotions, your thoughts, and your body when you have developed a harmonious relationship between heart and mind, which is key 8 and key 1. I'm not ready to go to that slide yet. Remember, we have those aspects of mind, but those aspects of mind are not who we essentially are. They are tools of the mind we are meant to use. We should no more identify with the mind any more than a carpenter, here we go, should identify with his tools. This is my hammer, he might say. He doesn't say, this hammer is me. Thor doesn't even say that. So exposing the devil within happens as a natural consequence of creating a healthy relationship between the first two keys. It's kind of like doing a detox cleanse for your spirit. Not only are you better able to recognize the devil within you, but you are also better at recognizing the devil outside of you. Furthermore, since key 15 corresponds astrologically with Capricorn, when you successfully lower your mind into your heart, you can better achieve the fulfillment of your desires. Now, the question is, what kind of desires are you fulfilling? The never-ending superficial desires of the lower ego, or the pure high vibrational desires of your higher self? Speaking of unity consciousness, which is what we're looking for, yoga literally translates as union. If you are in union, there is nothing left to desire, and there is nothing in the outside world that you need to seek or change or try and control, because you are content and free. You can enjoy the world of form, or Maya, for what it is, with no expectations. You are able, as Byron Katie says, to love what is. The imagery of the devil is there to remind us that as long as we put our faith in the outside material world for fulfillment, we will be in bondage to it. The upside down pentagram that's right there on top of his head says it all. Instead of relying on our higher self to fulfill our needs, which is the star upright, we rely on people, things, systems, and the outside world in general, which is the star reversed. Because these things are outside of us, we can never control them, and to try to do so will result in acts of foolish desperation. We can only change our circumstances for the better by changing how we think and feel, to elevate our mind so that we will be in resonance with our pure, heartfelt desires. If you want to be loved, then engage in the act of love. Love yourself, love the people around you, and foster a feeling of love for everything in your life. You will begin to resonate with the vibrations of love, and you will attract more love into your life. If you want more stuff or more money, know first that the stuff and money won't in and of themselves bring you fulfillment. However, paying bills and taking care of needs and having fun are all desirable things. So if you want more of that, instead of focusing on what you don't have, generate sincere feelings of gratitude. Gratitude for what you already have creates a resonance that attracts more of that into your life. Just as finding happiness is an internal process, slaying the devil is too. The devil is the part of us that worries about what to do, feels anxiety about our future, and regrets the past. The devil is the part of us that rationalizes what we know deep inside is the antithesis of soul connection. The devil in the world is anything that triggers us. Therefore, in such a situation, the devil in the world can be our greatest teacher. The Dalai Lama once described Mao Zedong in surprising terms. This communist leader of China, who in the 1950s sent his forces to invade and occupy Tibet, forcing the Dalai Lama to flee to India, was described by the Dalai Lama as one of his greatest teachers. And then there's one of the Dalai Lama's monks who asks His Holiness for forgiveness regarding his time being imprisoned and tortured at the hands of the occupying soldiers. "Brother, why do you require my forgiveness?" asked the Dalai Lama. The old monk replied that on one occasion he had allowed his anger to overcome his love, kindness, and compassion for his oppressors. Just once, he had allowed his suffering to blind him to the reality that his torturers were suffering, and it was this suffering that caused them to brutally persecute him and his kinfolk. Imagine that. This monk wasn't upset about the trauma of being tortured. He was upset with possibly causing ripple effects of bad karma with his negative thinking. When I hear stories like that, I realize how far I have yet to go on my own path to liberation. So, to sum up the lessons of Key 15, remember the Peter Crone quote: life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free. The trick is to not take whatever offends you personally and to next ask yourself how you can transform to be less affected by things you have no control over. One by one, the devils, which mean ignorance, will fall to ultimately be replaced by angels, which are the light of awareness. You will see that everything in this world is an expression of the one power, the Brahman, the Atman, or God. All right, so now we've come to the part in the show for practical practices of purpose. Basically, I will be offering some mindfulness and meditation practices that I highly recommend in achieving the goals of stage 1 of the 7 stages of spiritual unfoldment, which is mental freedom from bondage. So first up, we have Yoga Nidra. Yoga Nidra or Nidra, you can listen to a bunch of guided meditations on YouTube or wherever. This meditation sets you up to create the powerful hypnagogic state that is fertile ground for focused intentions to grow to fruition. If you meditate on the wish fulfilled, imagine what state you want to achieve as if you've already achieved it. For example, if you want to build your self-confidence, imagine yourself speaking on stage to an auditorium packed with people who are applauding you with a spirited standing ovation. The vital principle of this method is in generating the appropriate emotion, which will act as rocket fuel for your affirmation. How would you feel if your wish were fulfilled? Evoke that feeling as you recite the affirmation. It helps to enunciate and speak each word powerfully, either out loud or in your mind. A quote from a yogi about affirmations: the repetition of affirmations ought to be firm and continuous, that the strength of the will or reason or emotion be sufficient to stimulate the inactive life energy and to redirect it into normal channels. Impregnate your affirmations with devotion, will, and faith, intensely and repeatedly, unmindful of the results, which will come naturally as the fruit of your labors. Paramahansa Yogananda. Then there are Kriya Yoga techniques. So the way I do these is I repeat them fast, and I use a U sound instead of the A sound here. So for the first chakra, it's lum, 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 lum. And the second chakra, it's vum, 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 vum. Whoops. Basically, I'll be offering some mindfulness and meditation practices that, sorry. The third chakra, rum, 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 rum. Fourth chakra, yum, 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 yum. I like the fourth chakra, which is the heart chakra, that the word they have is yum. Fifth chakra is hum, 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 hum. Sixth chakra is om, 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 and same with the seventh. Moving on, intentions and affirmations for the first stage of spiritual unfoldment. Note, when making these affirmations mentally, it will add fuel to the words. Did I have a note here? Sorry about that. All right. So let's just move on to advice from Paramahansa Yogananda. Before starting to affirm, always free the mind from worries and restlessness. Choose your affirmation and repeat all of it. First loudly, then softly, then more slowly, until your voice becomes a whisper. Then gradually affirm it mentally only, without moving the tongues or the lips, until you feel that you have attained deep, unbroken concentration, not unconscious, but a profound continuity of uninterrupted thought. All right, so here are some examples of some affirmations. The I am ready is a great one. So I am ready to be aware of how I think and feel. I am ready to be in alignment with my divine self. I am ready to nurture my soul's desires. I am ready to be the magician of my own life, etc. So note, I am ready is a powerful phrase because it informs your subconscious mind to prepare you for whatever it is you are affirming, even if you don't actually feel that you are ready. It's kind of like a fake it till you make it thing. Then there's I deserve. It works the same way because subconsciously we have been telling ourselves that we are not worthy. I deserve happiness, I deserve love, I deserve abundance, etc. Then there is my mind. My mind is a perfect conduit for divine expression, or I am a perfect conduit for divine expression. All right. There's another one more here. The healing power of spirit is flowing through all of the cells of my body. I like this one. The healing power of spirit is flowing through all of the cells of my body. And then there's a bunch here. I attune my thoughts to the highest realms of love, light, and wisdom. This one, you inhale, then you say as you inhale, I think my life to flow. Then you exhale, I know my life to flow. And another one, you inhale, I am not my body. Then on the exhale, I am not even my mind. I summon my divine birthright intuitively, realizing that all wisdom and power already exist in my soul. And the sunshine of divine prosperity has burst through the dark sky of limitations. All right, well, that about wraps it up for the first stage of spiritual unfoldment. I will be releasing another video probably next week, and it will be called The High Priestess Lights the Hermit's Lantern That Strikes Down the Tower of Lies. All right, there's Paul Foster Case. Thank you for listening and attending and all the rest.